We know what factors are. Factors are numbers that multiply together to get a product. But factors in and of themselves aren't really important. They are only important when we talk about something called the greatest common factor, or the GCF. And GCF is very powerful. It's going to help us with a lot of things. It's going to help us simplify fractions. It's going to help us in ratio tables, and it's going to help us solve some word problems. So in order to understand what a greatest common factor is, we have to look at the three words, greatest common factor. So factor, we know what factor is, right? A factor is a number you multiply by another number to get a product. Common, well, when we have common factors, that means that two numbers have the same factors. And obviously, greatest means the highest number. So let's see how this works. I want to find the greatest common factor of 8 and 12. So what I've done here is I have drawn what we call a Venn diagram. And most of you probably know what a Venn diagram is. A Venn diagram is to compare and contrast things, right? So this middle section here, let's kind of highlight it. This middle section is what things have in common. All right, and these outer parts of the circle or what things don't have in common, and a lot of times you'll see this in ELA to compare and contrast. Okay, so now this circle is going to be the factors of 8, and the darker circle to the right is going to be the factors of 12. And the pink section is their common factors. So I'm going to go one by one. Okay, let's look at the number 1. I have all the numbers listed to the right. Is 1 a factor of 8? Yes, 1 times 8 is 8. Is it a factor of 12? Yes, because 1 times 12 is 12. So 1 goes here. What about 2? Well, I know that 2 times 4 is 8. And I know that 2 times 6 is 12, so 2 is going to go also in the center. What about 3? Well, I can't multiply 3 by any whole number to get 8, so I know that 3 is not a factor of 8. But it is a factor of 12 because 3 times 4 is 12. So I'm going to put that there. 4, okay, 4 times 2 is 8, and 4 times 3 is 12, so 4 would go in the middle. 5 is not a factor of either one, so I'll kind of put it kind of floating around on the outside. 6, well, nope, not a factor of 8, but it is a factor of 12, right? Because 6 times 2. So let's put 6. 7, nope, 7's floating around. 8 is a factor of itself because 8 times 1 is 8. It is not a factor of 12. 9 is not a factor of either one, so we'll put 9 hanging out. 10 hanging out. 11 hanging out. And 12 is a factor of 12 because 12 times 1 is 12. Now, these numbers in the pink are the common factors. So the common factors are 1, 2, and 4. And if we look for the greatest common factor, that's going to be the highest number. Well, the highest factor that they have in common is 4. So the GCF of 8 and 12 is equal to 4. That's kind of nice, but it's kind of a long method. And if you have a lot of greatest common factor problems that you have to do, you certainly want a shorter method. So we're going to use something that we call upside down division. Different people call it different things. You can call it upside down wedding cake, but essentially it's upside down division, and you're going to see why we call it that. So I'm going to put my two numbers that I want to find the common factor of. I have 8 and I have 12. You can put a comma in between. It doesn't really matter. Just know that they're two different numbers. Upside down division, so I'm making an upside down long division little house. Sometimes we call it a house. And here's the problem. I have two dividends, right? I have two numbers I want to divide, but I don't have a divisor. I don't have anything I want to divide into them. And here's the challenging part, okay? I have to come up with a number that divides evenly into 8 and 12. And those are going to be the factors. Let's say I look at these and I'm not really sure. I know that they're both even. So they're both divisible by 2. So I'm going to put 2 here. And I'm going to circle it because I'm going to circle all my divisors are going to be common factors. So 2 goes into 8 4 times. 2 goes into 12 6 times. Now I'm going to look at 4 and 12. And I'm going to ask myself, what do 4 and 6 have in common? Well, I know they have a 2 in common, right? So I'm going to put another 2 as my divisor. I'm going to circle it. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 goes into 6 3 times. Now I'm going to see, what do 2 and 3 have in common? What factors? Well, the only factor they have in common is 1, right? Because 1 times 2 is 2 and 1 times... When I get to the point where the only common factor is 1, we call these two numbers, we call them relatively, whoops, I hate when that happens, relatively prime. And now we're done. Well, we're done. What do you mean we're done? Okay, well now in order to find the GCF, we're going to multiply the factors that they have in common. Okay, so they have a 2 in common and then another 2 in common, right? 2 circled numbers, and that equals 4. And so the GCF is 4, and that's what we found up here in our Venn diagram. Okay, so I think it's a little easier. I remember when I first learned this, it was like, wow, this is really cool. So let's try another one, okay? I want you to find the greatest common factor for 120 and 30. Okay. Let's set it up. 120 and 30. And let's see, here we go. What do they have in common? Well, I see that they have a 0 in the ones place. That means they have a 10 in common, right? So 10 goes into 120 12 times, because 10 times 12 is 120. 10 goes into 30 3 times, because 10 times 3 is 30. Don't forget to circle your divisor. Now I'm going to look 12 and 3. Do they have anything in common? Yes, they do, right? They are both divisible by 3. So 3 is a factor of 12. 3 times 4 is 12. And 3 times 1 is 3. Looking at 4 and 1, 4 and 1 are relatively prime because the only factor they have in common is 1. So in order to find the GCF, or the greatest common factor of 120 and 30, I'm going to multiply the two factors together, 10 times 3, and that equals 30. So the GCF of 120 and 30 is 30. Okay, because 30 times 1 is 30, And 30 times what is 120? I think it's times 4. Okay, so 30 times 4 is 120. 30 times 1 is 30. And so the GCF of 120 and 30 is